The House That Dreamed, a midnight tale from the old countryside. The night had the kind of silence that only deep countryside can hold, a silence thick enough to make you notice your own heartbeat. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of wet earth and lilac, as if the rain had only just left. A single road curved through the endless dark fields, no signs, no lights, no sound but the soft crunch of shoes on gravel. I had been walking for nearly an hour, ever since my car gave up. Somewhere behind me, engine dead, headlights fading into nothing, my phone had lost signal miles ago. The moon was bright but distant, silver light gliding across the fields like water, every now and then, a barn owl crossed the sky, silent and pale. I wasn't afraid, just tired. There's a strange calm that comes when you're too deep into nowhere to panic, you just keep walking. Then, far in the distance, I saw it, a flicker. At first I thought it was lightning, but it came again, a faint, golden pulse. From the top of a hill, a light in a window. A house. It looked impossibly far, but it was the only sign of life for miles. I pulled my jacket tighter and started toward it. The closer I came, the stranger it looked, not ruined, but old, the kind of old that carries stories in its walls. The trees around it seemed to bend inward, as if listening. At the foot of the hill, I found a rusted iron gate half open, on the crossbar. Barely legible, were faded letters carved long ago. The Hollow Dream. I smiled despite the chill. What a name, I whispered to myself. The wind stirred, soft, almost answering. The path up to the front porch was lined with wildflowers and forgotten stone lanterns. As I reached the door, I hesitated. I could still turn back, wait for morning, maybe find help. But the rain began again, thin drops, gentle but persistent, the light in the window flickered once more, like an invitation. I raised my hand and knocked. The sound echoed too long. For a few moments, nothing. Then, with a sigh that sounded almost human, the door opened on its own. A warm, golden light spilled into the night. And just like that, I stepped inside. The warmth hit me first, a gentle, steady glow that felt almost alive. It wasn't just the firelight, the air itself seemed to hum with a kind of memory, as if the room had been waiting to exhale. Inside, everything looked like a photograph left too long in the sun, faded but beautiful. A long hallway stretched before me, lined with wallpaper patterned in small roses, their color washed nearly away. The wood beneath my feet creaked in slow, tired rhythms, like an old lullaby played on floorboards. I called out softly, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Clock answered, a deep, deliberate tick-tock tick from somewhere in the next room. The smell of tea drifted faintly through the air, black tea, maybe with honey. Somewhere nearby, a chair scraped against wood. I followed the sound into a parlor where a small fire crackled in the hearth. The furniture looked untouched for decades, a sofa embroidered with vines, a bookshelf filled with cracked spines. A lace curtain trembling slightly though no window was open. On the mantel stood a row of photographs, a family from another time, a man in a waistcoat, a woman in lace gloves, two children standing stiffly as if afraid of the camera. Their eyes seemed kind, but distant, the way eyes always are in old photos. Then I noticed something curious. In the corner of the room, half hidden in shadow, was a wooden Sign, the same name carved into it as I had seen at the gate. The Hollow Dream. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure if I should call again or quietly leave. That was when I heard her voice. Good evening. I turned. She stood in the doorway, an elderly woman, tall and graceful, her gray hair gathered in a neat bun. She wore a long, faded dress that might once have been green. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, and her smile was calm but unreadable. I'm sorry, I began. I didn't mean to intrude. My car broke down on the road, and... Of course, she interrupted gently, her voice smooth as silk. You've come in from the rain, you must be cold. I nodded, unsure how to explain the strange relief I felt at the sound of her voice. Please, she said, motioning toward a chair near the fire, sit, warm yourself. I'll fetch some tea. I wanted to protest, to say I couldn't impose, but my legs had already agreed for me. The chair sighed as I sank into it. The firelight painted the walls gold and amber, the room breathing softly like something asleep. She returned a few moments later, carrying a small tray, 2 teacups, a pot, a bowl of sugar cubes. The porcelain was delicate, patterned with blue vines that curled like smoke. Thank you, I said. She poured slowly, gracefully, as though every movement mattered. It's been a long time since we've had a visitor, she said. I smiled, trying to hide my unease. You live here alone? Up, her eyes shining faintly in the firelight. Oh, not entirely. The house doesn't like to be lonely. The words hung in the air, soft but strange. I tried to laugh, but something in her expression stopped me. You mean family? I asked. She smiled, a small, secret smile, something like that. For a moment, the clock stopped ticking, or perhaps I only imagined it. The house seemed to listen. Then she said quietly, you may call me Mrs. Ellery. And for the first time that night, I realized, the light in the room didn't come from the fire alone, it came from the walls themselves, pulsing faintly, like the steady breath of something very old, very alive, and half asleep. Mrs. Ellery's eyes seemed to hold the color of candlelight, soft, uncertain, but steady. She sat across from me, the fire between us whispering like it was part of the conversation. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, only the house did, faintly, somewhere above, a floorboard sighed. Somewhere behind the wall, a clock ticked on in its lonely rhythm. Finally, she said, you've come a long way tonight. I nodded. About 10 miles from the nearest town, I think. My car stopped on the main road, near a row of birches. Yes, she said quietly, the birches have been there since before the war. They like to keep watch over travelers. I smiled at her phrasing, keep watch. There was something poetic in the way she spoke, as though every object around her carried a small story. She added another cube of sugar to her tea and stirred slowly. The silver spoon made the softest chime. Do many people come this way? Oh, not many anymore, she said. There used to be a village not far from here. But time moved on, as it always does. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the rain traced silver lines down the glass. I followed her eyes. The garden outside was half lit by moonlight, a tangle of vines, old statues. A pond so still it looked like glass. It was beautiful in a lonely way. When I turned back, she was watching me. "You're wondering why the light was on," she said. I hesitated. "I suppose I am." She smiled. "The house likes to call when it feels awake." The fire popped softly, sending a small spark up the chimney. I frowned a little. "You mean, the house?" She said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It has its moods, its dreams, sometimes it remembers things, sometimes it invites company." Her calmness made it sound perfectly reasonable. I leaned back in the chair, letting the warmth sink into me. "And you've lived here long?" She nodded slowly. "Long enough to learn its language, long enough to know that no one truly owns a house like this, we only borrow its company." The way she said borrow made something shiver inside me. She glanced at the clock. "It's past midnight," she said gently. "You must be exhausted." The guest room is ready upstairs, please, rest for the night." I hesitated again, but she smiled in that quiet, reassuring way that made saying no impossible. "Thank you," I said softly, "you're very kind." Her eyes seemed to warm. "Kindness," she said, "is what keeps the house dreaming." She stood, taking the teapot away. "The stairs are at the end of the hall. You'll know your room when you see it." As I rose, the walls seemed to pulse faintly with light, as if lanterns were burning inside them, dim and rhythmic, like breathing. I glanced back once more before leaving the room. Mrs. Ellery was still there, her silhouette framed by the fire. She looked almost like part of the house, carved from its warmth and quiet. And as I stepped into the hallway, the old grandfather clock struck 1. The sound echoed down the hall, deep and hollow. With every chime, it felt less like a clock, and more like the heartbeat of the house itself. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel of candlelight and shadow. Each step I took stirred a faint echo, as though the house was whispering my footsteps back to me. I passed framed portraits, their subjects half faded by time, men in dark coats, women with ribbons and pearls, faces caught forever between smiles and secrets. Their eyes seemed to follow quietly, not in menace, but in curiosity. The wallpaper, that same worn rose pattern, seemed to shimmer faintly as I moved. Perhaps it was the flicker of light, or perhaps something more. At the end of the hall stood a door, painted in a soft shade of green. Its brass handle felt cool beneath my hand. The moment I touched it, a warmth pulsed through the metal. Subtle, like a heartbeat. It open, the air inside was still and fragrant with lavender. The guest room was small but comforting, an old canopy bed, white curtains that swayed the windows were closed, a writing desk with a candle that was already burning. Someone, or something, had prepared it for me. I sat at the edge of the bed, letting my shoes rest on the rug. My body felt heavier than it should have. The fire's warmth from downstairs still lingered in my bones. Then I heard it. At first, it sounded like the sigh of wind slipping through the chimney, but as I listened closer, it shaped itself into something different. Whispers. Very faint, like people murmuring in the next room, their voices blurred by sleep and distance. I held my breath. The sound came from the walls, soft and overlapping, as though a dozen stories were being told all at once. Then, clear enough to make my skin prickle, came a single voice, warm, weary, and kind. "Do you remember me?" I froze. The whisper faded, swallowed by silence. The candle flickered once, then calmed. I waited, listening, nothing. It must have been the wind, I told myself, or my imagination. Houses this old have their sounds. Wood expanding, air settling, wind weaving through cracks. And yet, something about the voice felt familiar, not in its sound, but in its feeling, as though I should remember. I stood and crossed to the window. The garden lay quiet below, silver with moonlight. Somewhere beyond it, an owl called softly, low and lonely. From here, I could see the faint reflection of the house in the pond, only, the reflection was brighter. In the mirrored water, the windows glowed with a golden light, but when I looked back at the real house, darkness. It made me smile, oddly comforted. Perhaps this place truly dreamed. On the desk, beneath the candle, lay an old leather-bound book. Its cover was blank except for one word pressed faintly into the leather. Guests. I opened it slowly. The pages were filled with handwritten names, dozens, maybe hundreds, written in ink that had faded to brown, each name followed by a date. The most recent one, at the bottom of the page, read E. Ellery, 1912. The candle flickered again, casting a tremble over the page. Mrs. Ellery's name. And yet, she had spoken to me downstairs not 10 minutes ago. I closed the book gently and set it back. For a while, I simply sat there, listening to the steady rhythm of rain against the window, the house breathing quietly around me. Whatever stories it held, I could almost feel them, resting in the walls, waiting to be remembered. Finally, I blew out the candle and lay down. The bed sighed softly, and the whispering voices faded into something deeper. The hum of a house falling back into dreams. As my eyes closed, I thought I heard one last voice, a child's this time, near my ear, sweet and distant. Good night, traveler. And then, the world drifted away. Sleep came softly, not as a fall, but as a gentle drift, like being carried down a quiet river of warmth and shadow. At first, I thought I was dreaming, then I realized the house was dreaming with me. The air around me shimmered faintly, the lavender scent deepened, the whispering that had lulled me to sleep began to take shape, not words now, but music. A piano. Soft, careful notes, as though someone was trying not to wake the world. I opened my eyes. The guest room glowed differently, not candlelight this time, but sunlight, bright and golden. Through curtains that looked new, the dust was gone, the wallpaper shone with its original rose color. The same house, but younger, awake. Down the hall, I could hear laughter, low voices, the rustle of skirts. I rose. Bare feet against polished floorboards that no longer creaked. At the bottom of the stairs, the parlor was alive. The fireplace blazed, the tea set gleamed like porcelain stars, the air carried the smell of cinnamon and baked apples. And there, at the piano, a man sat playing, his fingers moving with quiet joy. His reflection shimmered in the glass cabinet nearby, though the cabinet itself was empty. Mrs. Ellery stood beside him, younger, her hair dark, her dress emerald green. She looked radiant, her eyes bright and alive. I watched as a small boy and girl danced around the room, their laughter the same sound I'd heard in the whispers. The man finished the song with a final, tender chord, the children clapped, and Mrs. Ellery leaned down to kiss the boy's head. It was all so peaceful, so human, that for a while, I forgot to breathe. But then, the man by the piano lifted his gaze and looked directly at me. His expression didn't change, calm, gentle, but his eyes were sharp with awareness. He saw me, truly saw me. He rose slowly, crossing the room without sound. The others didn't seem to notice him leave. When he reached me, he stopped just beyond arm's reach. His voice was low, kind, almost apologetic. "Please don't let it forget us." Before I could answer, the world rippled, like ink spreading through water. The light dimmed, the piano faded into silence. The warmth drained away, leaving only the faint chill of moonlight and the steady ticking of the clock. I blinked. The parlor was empty again, the fire cold, the air still. Only the faint scent of cinnamon lingered, sweet and ghostly. I turned toward the stairs, my heart beating in the quiet. On the piano stood a single teacup, still warm. When I woke, the world was pale and silver. Sunlight poured through the curtains, bright but thin, like light seen through mist. For a moment I lay still, unsure if I was awake or dreaming again. The lavender scent was gone, replaced by the crisp air of morning. The piano song still lingered faintly in my mind, echoing through memory like something half-remembered from another life. I sat up, the candle on the desk had burned to the end, the wax cooled into delicate folds. The book, Guests, was still there, though its pages now looked blank, no names, no ink, just empty paper. I rose and crossed to the door. The floorboards beneath my feet felt cool. I expected them to groan, as they had the night before, but they didn't, not a sound. The hallway beyond was washed in daylight, and yet it looked smaller, tighter, somehow less alive. "Mrs. Ellery?" I called softly. Only the echo answered. I walked downstairs, my steps too loud in the silence. The parlor was empty, the fire dead, the teapot cold. The chair where she had sat was perfectly in place, its cushion untouched, as though no one had ever used it. The photographs on the mantel were gone, in their place, faint rectangles of cleaner wallpaper, marking where they had once hung. I turned slowly, taking in the room. The clock was still there, but its hands were missing. Something in me whispered, "The house is sleeping again." I set my cup on the table, though there was no cup in my hand. Old habit, maybe, my reflection in the window looked distant, uncertain, as if the light passed through me instead of resting on me. A sound drew me to the desk near the window. There, on the surface, lay a small brass key. Next to it, a folded note. The handwriting was fine and looping, unmistakably hers. "For when you return." That was all it said. I held the note for a long moment, tracing the ink with my thumb. The paper felt strangely warm, as if freshly written. I turned toward the window again, and froze. Outside, where the garden had been, there was only an open field, no statues, no pond, no gate, just wind moving through wild grass under the brightening sky. I stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked once, then stilled. Behind me, the house stood quiet, its windows dark and blank. I took one step down the path, then another. When I reached the bottom of the hill, I turned back for a final glance, but there was nothing there, no house, only a field of pale morning light. The birds had begun to sing, soft, simple songs that belonged to a world that never remembered its dreams. I slipped the key into my pocket and walked toward the road. I didn't look back again. The next morning, the fog over Ravenshade was heavier than ever, it clung to the rooftops like cobwebs, dulling the sunlight and swallowing every sound. Eleanor woke to the slow, rhythmic creak of the house, or so she thought, but when she opened her eyes, she saw something strange, muddy footprints on the wooden floor, leading from the hallway to her bed. She froze. No one else had been in the house, at least, not that she knew of. The footprints were small, too small for an adult. They stopped right beside her bed and disappeared. Eleanor's breath hitched. For a moment, she could hear a faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves underwater. You shouldn't have come back. She bolted up, her heart hammering in her chest, but when she looked again, the prints were gone, vanished, as if wiped clean by invisible hands. Determined not to give in to fear, Eleanor dressed quickly and stepped outside. The village was eerily quiet, even the birds had stopped singing. At the edge of the forest, she saw someone waiting, an old woman wrapped in layers of tattered shawls. Her eyes were cloudy, her skin pale as candle wax. "You're the Blackwood girl," the old woman rasped, "the one who left." Eleanor hesitated. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled, showing blackened teeth. "Everyone who stays long enough in Ravenshade knows me. I'm the keeper of memories." Eleanor frowned. "Memories?" The woman nodded slowly. "This village feeds on them. The more you remember, the stronger it gets. That's why no one leaves. That's why your parents never truly died." Eleanor's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" The woman leaned closer. "They're still here, beneath the forest, beneath us. Bound by the whispers." Eleanor felt her skin crawl. "How can I find them?" The old woman looked toward the fog-shrouded woods. "Follow the river when the moon is high, but beware, the river remembers too much. It will show you what you seek and what you should never have known." Before Eleanor could respond, the woman turned and vanished into the mist, leaving only a faint scent of ash and lavender behind. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The wind outside moaned through the cracks, carrying fragments of whispers, voices that seemed to call her name. She rose, grabbed a lantern, and made her way toward the forest. The trees loomed tall and skeletal, their branches dripping with mist. She followed the sound of running water until she reached the river. The moon hung low, silver and swollen, casting ripples of light across the dark current. As she leaned over the edge, she saw something move in the water. Faces, familiar faces, her mother's soft eyes, her father's tired smile. They looked peaceful, until their mouths opened in silent screams. Eleanor stumbled backward, the lantern slipping from her grasp and hissing out in the damp earth. The river seemed to swell, the whispers growing louder, more frantic, and then, above the chaos, she heard one clear voice, her father's. "Find the heart of the forest, end the curse." Trembling, Eleanor whispered back into the darkness, "I will." And as the river quieted, she noticed something glinting near the bank, a small, blackened locket. Shaped like a raven's wing, inside was a faded photograph of her parents, and a name she didn't recognize carved into the metal, Ravenshade. The village wasn't just haunted, it was alive.